He had nothing to give but kindness. But when he helped a lost girl find her way home, he never expected what would happen next. The evening air was crisp and cold as Daniel Hayes, a struggling single father, walked home from another exhausting shift at the auto repair shop. His jacket was thin, barely shielding him from the chill, but buying a new one wasn't an option. Every extra dollar went toward feeding his 6-year-old son, Jake. As he turned onto the quiet street leading to their small, worn-down apartment, he noticed something strange. A little girl, no older than 7 or 8, was sitting alone on a park bench, shivering. She wore an expensive pink coat, her golden curls barely visible under her wool hat. Daniel hesitated. It was late, and no child should be out alone. He approached cautiously. "Hey there, sweetheart. Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her big blue eyes filled with tears. I can't find my way home," she sniffled. Daniel's heart clenched. He crouched down, gentle but firm. "What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered. "Okay, Lily," Daniel said softly. "Do you know your address? Your parents' names?" She shook her head, more tears spilling down her cheeks. Daniel sighed, pulling off his jacket and wrapping it around her. He couldn't just leave her here. "It's all right," he assured her. "We'll figure this out together." With no phone and no idea where she lived, Daniel had one option: to take her to his apartment for the night and find her family in the morning. But as he held her small, trembling hand and led her home, he had no idea that this single act of kindness would lead to something that would change his life forever. Because the next day, a luxury car would pull up in front of his house, and what happened next would leave him speechless. That night, Daniel did everything he could to make Lily feel safe. He gave her a warm blanket, shared a simple dinner of grilled cheese and soup, and even let her borrow Jake's favorite stuffed bear to help her sleep. Jake, curious but excited, whispered to his dad, "Are we keeping her?" Daniel smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "She's not ours to keep, buddy, but we'll help her until she finds her way home." Lily barely spoke, exhaustion taking over. But before she fell asleep on the couch, she whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Daniel." He sat nearby, watching her chest rise and fall, his mind racing. He didn't have much, not even enough to buy Jake new shoes for school, but he had done the right thing. The next morning, after giving Lily breakfast, Daniel took her to the police station to file a report. As soon as they arrived, an officer's eyes widened in shock. "Wait a second, that's Lily Montgomery." Daniel blinked. "You know her?" The officer nodded. "Her family has been looking for her everywhere. They're one of the wealthiest families in the city." Daniel glanced at Lily, who clung to his hand. He gave her a reassuring squeeze. "You're going home, sweetheart." But what Daniel didn't know was that his kindness had already been noticed. Because later that evening, as he sat on his front porch, exhausted from another long shift, he saw something that made him freeze in place. A sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of his small apartment. The door opened, and a man in a tailored suit stepped out, his expression unreadable. And when he spoke, his words would change Daniel's life forever. The sleek Rolls-Royce came to a smooth stop in front of Daniel's tiny apartment, its polished exterior a stark contrast to the rundown building. Daniel stood frozen on the porch, still in his grease-stained work shirt, watching as a tall, well-dressed man stepped out. His presence alone radiated authority and wealth. Then, from the other side of the car, Lily ran out, her face lighting up the moment she saw Daniel. "Mr. Daniel!" she squealed, rushing toward him. Before Daniel could react, she threw her arms around his waist, clutching him like she never wanted to let go. Behind her, the man approached. His sharp features softened as he extended a hand. "You must be the man who saved my daughter," he said. "I'm William Montgomery." Daniel shook his hand firmly. "Daniel Hayes. And I wouldn't say saved, sir. She just needed some help." William studied him for a moment, his gaze unreadable. Then, he turned to Lily. "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell me where you were last night?" Lily looked up at her father, then back at Daniel. "Because I didn't want you to be mad at me," she said softly. "And I didn't want to leave." Daniel's chest tightened. William sighed, kneeling to his daughter's level. "I wasn't mad, Lily. I was terrified. I thought I lost you." She nodded, finally releasing Daniel's shirt and stepping back to her father's side. William straightened and looked at Daniel again, his expression now serious. "Mr. Hayes, my daughter came home talking about how kind you were, how you took care of her without expecting anything in return. That's rare these days." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "I just did what any decent person would." William smiled slightly. "You'd be surprised how many wouldn't." Then, with a small nod to one of his assistants, William gestured toward the Rolls-Royce. "I'd like to repay your kindness," he said. The back door opened, revealing a briefcase. When the assistant handed it to Daniel, he felt the weight of it instantly. Curious, he slowly opened it, and what he saw made his knees nearly buckle. Inside were stacks of cash, enough to change his and Jake's lives forever. Daniel's breath caught. "Mr. Montgomery, this is too much." William raised a hand. "It's not just money, Mr. Hayes. There's also a job offer at one of my auto businesses. Full salary, benefits, and a home for you and your son. Consider it a thank you for showing my daughter what true kindness looks like." Daniel stared at him, his mind spinning. Yesterday he was struggling to keep the lights on. Today his life had just completely changed, and all because he had chosen kindness. Daniel stood there, staring at the briefcase full of money and the life-changing job offer in disbelief. It felt like a dream, one he was afraid to wake up from. Jake, who had been standing quietly behind his father, finally spoke. "Dad, does this mean we won't have to eat noodles every night anymore?" The innocent question made Daniel chuckle, but his eyes burned with emotion. He looked at his son, then back at William Montgomery. "I don't know how to thank you," Daniel said sincerely. William shook his head. "You already did. You took care of my daughter when you had nothing to give. That kind of kindness can't be repaid. But I can try." Daniel exhaled, his mind still racing. A part of him wanted to say no, to insist that he hadn't done anything extraordinary. But the truth was, this wasn't just about him. This was about Jake. This was about finally giving his son a life without struggle. He reached out and shook William's hand, his grip firm. "I'll take the job." A rare smile crossed William's face. "Good. You start Monday." Lily beamed. "Does this mean I get to visit Mr. Daniel and Jake all the time?" William chuckled. "I think we can arrange that." As the Rolls-Royce pulled away, Daniel stood outside his small apartment, holding his son's hand. Jake looked up at him, eyes wide. "Dad, are we rich now?" Daniel smiled, kneeling to his son's level. "No, buddy, but we're finally going to be okay." And for the first time in a long, long time, he truly believed it. Have you ever helped a stranger, not knowing how it would change your life? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this.